welcome to our second Startup Societies Café. If you don't have a cup of coffee or tea, get it ready because we're going to have a very interesting conversation with Janine Leger. Thank you so much, Janine, for being here with us today.
Sorry, were you speaking to me?
No, I am speaking to Janine.
Oh, so sorry.
Happy to be here.
Perfect. So, Janine, why don't you tell us a bit about what you are doing? So, Janine founded Edge City, which is a pop-up city that hosts about 200 to 300 people. And right now they are doing one in Patagonia, right? But let's begin with the basics, Janine. What is a pop-up city for those who are listening to the term for the first time?
Would it be helpful if I jump through I've just got a bunch of slides that I can go through, and then it at least gives everyone a visual while we're going through this.
That would be great.
Yes, of course.
Feel free to.
Perfect. Let me dive on in. Let's have a look. Here we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So what is Edge City? So we actually call Edge a society incubator, and our real focus is kind of on prototyping a brighter future and doing it in a number of different ways. So a little bit about me. I'm Janine. I'm one of the co-founders. I helped start the sort of pop-up city movement with a number of different people, including Vitalik Buterin and Nicole Sun and a few other folks, with the first one that we did called Zuzulu. And it was really just like an iteration of like, what does it look like if we bring 200 people together for a longer period of time? Can we actually prototype new ways of living and sort of the concepts of network societies in general? Fast forward, from that, we had a lot of great learnings. We decided not to do anything more with Zuzulu from, running more Zuzulu events, but what we wanted to create instead was decentralize it and build an entire ecosystem. So Edge came out of that ecosystem, and our focus, myself and Timur Kostas, who's my co-founder, we sort of really loved this idea of a society incubator. And what we do is sort of like three main things. So it's this idea of the pop-up village concept, which is really for us, it's a month-long period that we bring over 150 people together for the entire month and then have many different visitors throughout. We bring together people across tech, science, and culture in these villages around the world. And a big reason that we do it in many different places versus just in, one or two is because we think that the most important piece is building the social infrastructure and the resilience across cultures and between different cultures versus just in one place and building sort of a culture connected and attached to that one place in general. So that's one aspect of where we spend most of our time. The other is in incubating and accelerating startups, new institutions, and entirely new fields of thought. So see it as the pop-up villages allow us to really experiment with that. It allows us to find startups, to let startups sort of test themselves on the ground, have a ton of people that can try out what they're building and provide feedback. From an institutional standpoint, a lot of people are, trying to think about like, why are current institutions not fully working for some people, and building new ideas, testing those concepts out, and then scaling them in some capacity. And because we have been multidisciplinary, we've seen that a lot of different people have connected with one another that wouldn't have otherwise. And as a result, there's sort of new fields of thought and industry that are actually emerging from Edge, which has been really cool as a whole. So the pop-up villages almost give the spark and sort of a place for a lot of this to happen. And then the in-between that we spend a lot of time with different teams and helping them and connecting them or bringing them in for future events. And then lastly, a really big piece is, we're here talking about, this is the Startup Societies Café. So it would be apt for me to say that one of the things that we're really focused on is building the social infrastructure for network societies. We've seen that a lot of people have started with land first, and that has kind of been, something that's been done for a very long time. Real estate has been around for a very long time as an industry, but really diving into social infrastructure, and seeing it as like an entirely important field to create in order to shift how we relate and what sort of societal norms are integrated is a big piece of sort of where we've been focusing our time. So a little bit about like why I'm doing what I'm doing. And we can dive in here. It's just like I really care about shifting societal paradigms. Like I think we're at a time where technology is changing really fast. And oftentimes we just stumble along with it in terms of how society changes, but we always have an active choice, and we can really move that forward in some capacity if we just put some intention behind it. So building these kind of incubator environments like really allow for that shift. A reminder that at the end of the day, an ecosystem is way more capable than an individual. And we've shifted to this world where, we prize individuals on what their achievements are, versus ecosystems on what their achievements are. So if we can really dive into supporting ecosystems and building strong ecosystems, there's just so much more that we can achieve. So rebuilding that is important. And we're sort of seeing a big shift in general from, governments and large institutions being the people who had all the say, to smaller villages and communities and cities like having more of the power than previous. So I'm really curious to see where that goes. And you can see that the sort of like startup societies, and network societies as a whole is really trending in that direction. So looking at our progress, just, what is Edge? We've kind of gone through that a little bit. Why do I care about this? And, what have we been doing? So we've been around since last year. Our first event was last February. So we're a year and a half in, and during this time, we've had over 11,000 people join one of our pop-up villages. We've done 7 pop-ups across the world. We've had 80 different countries represented, and that's something we're really proud of, sort of having diversity from many different places, because to build a new culture, you almost need to start by having many different cultures to begin with versus one that you sort of have as like the primary that you deviate from. We've had over 50 startups and projects get started at Edge, and that's something we're really proud of, seeing that this is becoming an environment for people that are building companies that, are slightly different, including new city projects, or including new governance projects, or companies that are trying to create interesting behavioral health data sets. Like they're all focused on sort of building a totally different future, and that's something we're very proud of. We've got 2 different grant programs that run at the moment, and are building a third currently. So we've raised over $1 million that we are now giving out in grants, which is really cool. And that's to early stage research or promising talent, to attend our different pop-up villages, or to run at a research project in a space that we care about. So we've been super excited to see where that's gone. And then, something that's interesting is we've had over 150 kids attend, which is super fun to see just kind of what's happened there, because having a multi-generational environment creates a totally different type of space than other people expect. And you can see from a collaboration standpoint, we've got people across so many different areas. And that's something that's important to us, because it really ties into tapping into different types of funders and supporters, that all have slightly different goals, but as they mesh together, really care about human flourishing as an end goal. So here's just a bit about kind of where we have been so far. You know, we've done quite a bit in the US. We're just getting this one down in Patagonia started. We did something in Argentina last year called Aleph. That was sort of an incubation there that's now building out a new digital special economic zone. So that's really exciting to see that Thai be pulled into it. We did something in South Africa, something in Thailand, and we've recently been connecting with a new city project in Bhutan. That's going to be a mindfulness city. And you can see that from day one, we've really been focused on being global. It's super important to us that we're building something new that's focused on global innovation and not just being, you know, one place and recreating San Francisco. So a little bit about, I can dive into our approach quick. We have really been focused on sort of these like villages. We are actually going to have 300 people in Patagonia full time for the whole month, starting on Saturday, which is awesome. And then about another 200 people that'll come in through the course of the time. We've got, you know, just this focus on residencies and theme tracks. So think about it as a residency is a place where, you know, you are living with other people. You don't necessarily have to, you could be living in your own apartment, but there's a shared group that you are pushing your idea forward with. And then something that is really important to us is having these 4 core organizational principles, which are really focused on being default healthy. You know, people start their days working out. There's sauna cold plunges, and the food that people are eating is as much as possible locally sourced and natural. Just a big piece to us is that most cities today are making us sick. And when you actually look at a lot of countries in the world, we are building a more unhealthy population than we ever have previously. And that's something that really needs to change if we care about human flourishing. The other aspect is being multidisciplinary. It's key to us to bring together people from different worlds and backgrounds, because that's where we think that the most interesting innovations happen. And then there's kind of this focus on building and co-creation. People are not just coming to consume. And in actual fact, if people do just come and expect, you know, a lot from it, I don't think they're going to get a lot in return. The real focus is using the opportunity to give back, to build with other people, to work on a project and get feedback on it, to do a presentation, to kind of focus on like being generative. So much of our lives could be shifted to being consumptive in nature, and a generative environment is something that is so critical. The other aspect that we sort of have been touching on, and I mentioned earlier, is being multi-generational. We've seen that people have come to life with having more kids around, having more elderly around, where it's interesting how, especially in the West, we've defaulted to segmenting a lot more of how people are spending time together by generations. And there's so much to learn from kids. There's so much to learn from the elderly, and yet we're sort of keeping people in silos across age gaps, especially in learning environments. So school, you're mainly with the same age group. College, you're mainly with the same age group. And as a result, that's just kind of what we tend to do. But there's so much learning that can go between generations. And here's just a little bit more about like ultimately here's just some photos. We create the best possible environment to like live and connect and build for this 1 month sprint when people are together. And that's what brings in so many incredible people, is that there's these like really, you know, fundamental principles of being kind, curious, and high agency with the different aspects that I just shared with you, and it allows for a lot of depth and connection. And across the board, it's easy to build a network these days. Like you can just pull together a group chat and you can say, cool, we've got a network. Or you can, pull together a group on Twitter and say, well, I've got all these followers. But it's like building a network that actually does things together and has a big vision and cares about the people around you to actually push things forward in a deeper way. That's something that is really important to cultivate. And that, no amount of just quick technology doing it for us is going to achieve. So we really care about creating this space that becomes the best place to build, because rapid feedback cycles from the community are super important, and it can result in much faster trials and cheaper progress than people would have anywhere else. A startup normally says if they get 10 pieces of feedback in 2 weeks, that's super valuable. It's like, hey, you can get, 100 people within a day. So just kind of as an example, I think it's useful for me to jump through some projects and experiments that we've run. Like, what are some of these ideas and what do people build at Edge, just to give you a sense of what happens. So let me quickly run through some of these. A startup that came out of the last Edge is called Constellation. They ran this neurotech experiment at Edge Esmeralda. They demonstrated the startup concept. They were really struggling to find investors ahead of the project because it's just a very hard data set to collect. Avery, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, he is a Stanford neuroscience PhD, and he had this idea for Constellation, but needed some way to actually test it out on a cheaper basis, because that was kind of the feedback that he was getting from everyone. He came to Edge Esmeralda, he ran a trial with willing attendees who didn't have to be paid. They were just stoked to sit down and do the trial, and demonstrated the proof of concept. And after 30 days, he raised his round, he built his team, he found a co-founder at Edge, and now he's got one of the most interesting neurotech startups in the Bay. So that's just what can happen in 30 days. Here this is just a little bit of a share around some of the applied research that we've helped get off the ground. So vasocomputation is this new field in consciousness that's becoming quite popular. Mike Johnson, who's a well-known theorist, has been to many different edges and loves sort of the experience as a whole. And he's been developing this idea for years. He's just kind of been thinking about it as a theorist, but because of having other people around who actually wanted to action more in it, Edge helped unblock him. It helped become a place where he could iterate on his ideas, get out a paper really fast, find early supporters, and it's gone from being an idea in his head to a research paper to a team of engineers and scientists being willing to and are excited to do a 6-month trial, and over sort of 300K in funding to do the initial trial in the next 6 months. So that's super exciting to see. Another experiment has been sort of field building. So DIAC, which is this concept that Vitalik Buterin coined, which is to do with defensive, democratic, and differential acceleration. The idea here was for us to help with a grants program. So we launched a grants program with Vitalik and then raised extra funds. We've got sort of 400K that has been going to different DIAC builders. And we hosted both a DIAC week at Edge Esmeralda, and now we're going to be having a residency in Patagonia. And we're just slowly building out support for the space. And we've seen over sort of a dozen startups and projects being accelerated because the funds that we have supported them with. And lastly, something that's really exciting is just what we've done with sort of new cities and permanent hubs. So Esmeralda is going to be a new town project just north of Healdsburg, where we do the Edge Esmeralda event that we've done every year. It'll be a walkable town that will be the primary focus. So it'll be very health focused. And then we'll have in the summers sort of a lot of programming similar to what we do with Edge Esmeralda. And then recently we were just in Bhutan to meet with government officials and do a tour of the new site of the new Galefu Mindfulness City project, where they broke ground earlier this year. And that's going to be a really cool new city that we are excited to collaborate with them around. So just kind of the last things is, we've got Edge City Patagonia coming up next. This is going to be really exciting. It starts this weekend. We have, a bunch of people from around the world flying to the small town in Patagonia. So it's pretty surreal seeing that happen. And it's a reminder of like, you and we should be able to build incredible seniors hubs around the world. It doesn't just have to rely on places that already have existing network effects like San Francisco, New York, Hong Kong, or whatnot. It really can be done if you are very concentrated on bringing together individuals that share an idea of a future that they want to see together and are dedicated to building and creating while they're together in a place. So, this is going to be a perfect example of a place that is just fully brought to life entirely differently to how it normally is during this time. It's the off season, so there's normally not that many people around. And instead, now we've got 500 people that'll be there for the course of this month. They'll be sharing ideas, testing new things out in one of the most beautiful places in the world. So that's happening. You can see just how beautiful it is. We've got sort of a number of different residencies that are going to be run. This is kind of like how the town is set up and just the different important pieces of what makes up the Edge Village itself. And these are all the residencies that are going to be running on the ground. So it's everything from consciousness to emerging market builders to human tech to AI and crypto. You've just got sort of a whole host of new projects and ideas. So if you're interested in getting involved, this one is just around the corner, but it just gives you a sense of how it's structured. But for something in the future, please do attend, run or sponsor a residency. And if you're a funder and want to support sort of the next generation of talent, like you're welcome to make a donation to one of our grant programs. So I figured that would just be an easy way to give everyone a sense of, what are we doing with Edge? And now we can sort of, Natalie, we can dive into a whole bunch of questions.
Yes, I think you've covered a lot of ground. You covered everything I had to ask you about, well, what have you learned? What have been your biggest achievements? So I think it would be a good moment to open questions to everybody who is attending. I just have one question before that, and it's the model is decentralized. You want to build communities in different parts of the world. Completely agree. I love that it's not focused on cities that are already big hubs. My question is, how do you take what you learn in one pop-up to the next in this? Yeah, how do you do that? And also, you're creating a culture even within this decentralized network, even if the culture is based on the decentralization of cultural identities and things like that. So what do you make of that, and how do you manage it, and how do you implement it into your minimum governance principles?
Yeah, so to dive into the first question, there's a lot of sort of like framework aspect here that we've taken from one to the next. Thinking about like tracks versus residencies, figuring out what works. We always sort of like test something on a small scale, and then if it works, scale it up more. So we tested residencies for the past 2 pop-ups with like 2 to 3 different residencies that we hosted. And then this one, we only have done residencies because we were like, wait, that model worked so well. So that's like one way. It's just kind of like iterative like learning and then sort of structure. The other is that there's a lot of people that have attended previous Edge events and sort of villages that like now call Edge their home in a lot of ways and end up attending multiple of them and bring the culture with them. So I think how we really do it is like very minimal, cultural oversight or sort of like people. It's not like here's a list of 50 things that you have to learn and this is how it's done, or here's how everyone has to do things on the ground. It's like we've got 4 guiding principles, and then we've got sort of like a way of being in terms of how people spend time together. And then from sort of more on the operational side, it's really this like iterative learning of like, okay, tracks worked because it brought, it allowed different people to experiment with things, but residencies really allows individuals to test out building their own ecosystem and, experimenting with a new project and sort of like growing from there, where they could maybe one day run their own pop-up. So that's on sort of like how do we take learnings from one to the next. How do we like integrate locally? A lot of the team ends up, so we've got a really small team as Edge. There's 5 people on the core team. And then for each pop-up, there's a lot more people that we'll bring on board, mainly that are local, that we're working with. So every place brings in a whole, new set of like 10 people that are really helping integrate or connect with local groups. We do a lot of sort of like connecting with local governance groups, and with what we have started picking up is doing these smaller events in places that we're like, okay, let's test out if this is going to be a good fit or not. So what we did in South Africa this year, what we did in Bhutan, what we did in Austin, were each only a week to 10 days in length. And with that, we then had sort of a more sort of extensive, like building the relationship first, and then we'll over time build towards a pop-up, because we think integrating with the social fabric of an existing environment is very important.
Yes, that is fascinating. Congratulations of all the work you've done, and all the best for your 7th pop-up. So let's open the questions to our attendees.
Yes, I'm gonna explain like the rules that we're going to follow to maintain like the organization of the questions. So in Zoom, you're gonna be able to raise your hands, and as I see the order of the people that raise their hands, I'm gonna be open up the mics and letting the people to participate. So let me check over here. So let me see if anyone had questions related to what your Janine just said.
So I have a question.
Okay.
Actually, I have a lot of questions. So for this next pop-up, or no, let's talk more broadly. How does someone who wants to collaborate with you and have a location in mind begin? Where would they begin?
Reaching out to our team. I think in terms of how we decide on locations, each one of these is so much work. Like it's no small feat hosting something. So for us, anything that's just sort of like a place that's cool is nice, but it's not probably going to be a place that we end up doubling down. The reason why is because we want to see long-term impact in places. So like in Argentina, we're helping with this digital special economic zone moving forward. And for us, like that's a really important thing to continue supporting in some way. Whereas for other projects, if we were to just like do it in somewhere like Bali without any longer term thing that we wanted to do there, it would be like, okay, well, why would we be doing this? So it's like Bhutan, there's this very long-term partnership that we're building there, because that city is going to probably take 50 years to make anything of it. And that's like a very slow progression. So anyone that's got either sort of a new town project that they're trying to get off the ground, or a special economic zone that they're trying to get off the ground in a specific area, those are places where we could be very interested in connecting and collaborating for the long term, or places where there's like a real sort of long-term vision for, building a seniors hub in some capacity. Awesome. I think KK had a question next, and then Ian, and then Tom.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing with us today. This has been really informative. I was just curious, how has been your process been with funding and really communicating the value of what you're doing to your various investors? Because I find that when trying to share this idea with other people, a lot of people are like, they don't really understand what it is or what we're trying to do. And so I was just really curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have built this in the most unconventional way, and I'm really stoked about that. It's both been hard in some areas, but it has given us a lot of freedom in others. So what we wanted to maximize was like access to freedom, and ideas that wouldn't necessarily force us to do any specific thing. So we actually avoided taking investment from anyone to start. And a big reason for that was like we actually had no idea what this was going to be. We didn't know if there was going to be was it going to be a company? Was it going to be an institution? Was it going to be a new city? Was it going to be a governing thing? So with that, like we wanted a lot of flexibility, and our thoughts were if we raised funding at the beginning and turned it more into sort of a company that we had investors to return a profit to in the short term, we would make decisions that had this become more like something that already exists in the world. Like I think we would have just become like an incubator very quickly, and not being able to sort of prioritize what we've been able to prioritize. So instead, what we focused on was like really raising by setting higher ticketing prices to start. So ticket prices that actually covered the experience. And then on the flip side, sponsorship for different, events on the ground that people could sponsor. So those were like our two methods, and then just being very lean as a team. So that was kind of like where we've started, and kind of has allowed us to experiment a lot more on the ground. Like I don't think we would have been able to do a lot of the multi-generational stuff that we've done, because the investment wouldn't have been very clear to investors, for example. It's like, well, education's not the easiest thing to invest in. Just kind of, putting funds aside for kids. It's like, well, what's the return there? But like long term, we think that's super interesting. So that's kind of been where a lot of it started, and just accruing a ton of trust with people, getting better with just like cutting down our costs a lot on the ground. Like events can be a beast and you can add up costs, but like doing what you can to minimize them, not taking on a ton of risk when it comes to accommodation. It's like we could have done that, but ultimately we like let people find all of their own spaces and try and like really bring down the costs. And then have, because of what we have done to date, we were able to attract a lot more sort of grant funding and support. And now we've got a lot of investors that are starting to be like, oh, wait, I'm actually really interested. And it's putting us in a position now of like, okay, if we do take investment, like why? And what's the like much bigger vision that we can do. So my like strong suggestion, if you're thinking about doing something, is like be okay with starting small. Like this is a whole new field, testing smaller ideas. Like I started long ago with like running group houses during COVID, and there were sort of month-long 20-person groups in mountain towns across the US, and that was just like a fun way to spend our COVID, and that gave me a lot of learnings, and sort of grew from that, and then did a bigger weekend event, and then did a bigger week-long event. And there's kind of like, you don't need to start by building a city. You can also start by just taking small steps to get there. But other people have done it different ways. Like some people have raised a ton of money to start, and are going after like the big vision before building sort of the trust and sustainability first, and like that's also working for some. So there's not only one way about going about it.
Thank you so much. So the
Ian.
next one is gonna be Ian.
Yes. Hey, Janine. That was literally my question, the funding aspect of it. But while you were talking, I thought of another question. In terms of looking forward, let's say 3 to 5 years, and the vision that you and your team has for Edge City. I know you're building this social infrastructure, right? From people from around the world, they can come to this one physical location for a month. But do you have more sort of like permanent plans with it? Because when you're engaging with these various cities, you're sort of building these relationships. And is that a part of like the longer term plan to create more of a permanent or a long term sort of physical location as you build globally?
Yeah, so what I kind of just spoke about was like where funding has come from to date, versus like the business model. But for us, like a lot of sort of where we're going is the partnerships that we're building with long-term towns aren't just sort of like for the good of the towns. It's like we're invested in making them work. So there's a side of it where it's like we're either giving in kind sort of support with building the network that's supporting the project. We're helping with funding, either from our network, we're helping sort of do SPVs into some of these new urbanism projects, or we are bringing in people that are going to buy houses in these locations. So we're actually we're getting upside in these like more permanent locations that will be part of the Edge network. So there's not going to sort of be like one specific Edge hub versus sort of like Edge will be a part of getting a lot of these new city and new town projects off the ground. The other aspect of sort of permanent hubs is like we're starting to see it already, where residencies that run at Edge are now like, wait, that was so good. We're going to run a node in a group house in San Francisco, or we're going to run a node in Berlin. So we're having conversations with a lot of groups. In South Africa, we've already got sort of like a node that's gotten started there. So it's like there's definitely going to be permanent hubs, but the magic of the like month-long, everyone dedicated to being there, over 200 people invested in kind of spending time together. I just don't think that can exist super, super easily in the sort of current way of how people spend their time. And that's okay, because like we don't have to always be on and always, and have this sort of like on-off period. So that's one aspect. And then the other side of like, where do we see ourselves in sort of like 2 to 3 years? It's like, I really hope we have helped incubate a lot of new companies and seen a lot of fields make a ton of progress. Like consciousness is like a science versus consciousness is a woo-woo thing on the side, is a field I really want to see get off the ground, and we're making a ton of progress around. I just actually got off the call with Julia Mossbridge, who she has run all the telepathy tapes research that has been done. And it's really cool to think about like, okay, what does a partnership there look like? And how do we like legitimize a lot more of this type of research? How do we legitimize stuff like vasocomputation, what I shared with you? It's like we've just helped them get like 300K in funding that's now going to support this like latches experiment. And it's like, if that's true, that completely shifts this whole idea of like emotions just being a random thing. It's like emotions exist in latches in our vascular system. And it's like, okay, that's actually more biological than we expected it to be. So I think that all that to say is like seeing new projects and companies getting started that we're incubating, where it means, we're getting some equity in the projects, helping fund those with like SPVs from the network or funds that we're connected to, and then get some upside in. There's kind of more of this like decentralized network effect that we can rely on to actually gain, recognition over time and gain a sort of financial sustainability over time, while the pop-ups are still creating this sort of like baseline foundation for funding coming in. So it's a fun flywheel to see happen, but it took a long time to get here.
Got you. Before you move on, real quick, very
Yeah.
quick. I saw that you were Emergent Ventures like grantee, so I'm actually going through that process as well. Would you mind? We actually met digitally like months ago, like 6 months ago, but you were like in New York and we weren't able to get together. But is it okay if maybe I could send some stuff your way? And since you're one who was successful in it, if there's like any pointers that you may have while I go through the process, would that be okay? Or
Yeah,
if
you're
you're busy,
welcome to.
it's fine.
You're welcome to. I will say it was there were more reasons than sort of the like network society side that I was supported for the Emergent Ventures funding and grant. I do think it's still it's a tough thing to get grant funding for and to figure out who is going to support this type of stuff. I think there's a lot of, just for context, like there's a lot of people that want to support the real estate stuff. And there's a lot of people, once you have a network that's interesting, that now wants to sort of be involved. Until you have the network and until you say you're going to do anything in real estate, it's very hard to sort of convince anyone to sort of fund an event per se.
Gotcha.
And finding a few different angles of like interesting research that you are going to do on the ground is super valuable. So, one thing that I kind of touched on in the presentation, but this is like just one example to think about, is we are running experiments that normally would cost like $200K to run through a university for $10,000, because you've got willing participants on the ground, you've got people that are engaged for a whole month. So you can get 20 participants in a research study for a project where and doing it in a condensed timeline, because you can also find volunteers that want to support the project versus having to fund 3 postdocs and 1 research assistant and like find 10 people that are then willing to stay connected to the study over the course of a year. That ends up taking sort of, $300K in funding. So that's like a really interesting arbitrage that we've actually seen. It's like, what does startup trials look like versus sort of institutional trials?
Right.
And
We can talk offline because I'll DM you because I got some stuff for you. So I don't want to take anybody else's time. But thank you.
you got it. Tom,
Hello, Janine.
hi, good to see you.
Likewise. I don't think you need encouragement. You seem like the kind of person that loves your work, but I'll just say I'm really grateful that you're out there doing what you do,
Thank you.
because in part, it's totally not what I would want to do, what I'm good at, getting people together. Uh, I like what I do. I think I'm good at it, but it's so important. You had this great line. You said something like, "We can't count on machines to do this for us." You got to get people together. You appreciate that, and you can make it happen. I don't know if I can, but
But then, Tom, you're working on stuff that I'm like, how are you doing that? So
it takes a team. It takes a
it
team.
takes a team.
It takes a lot
An
of people.
ecosystem's always better than an individual.
I'm going to make it to one of your events. My toddler now is 3. I think we're
Yes.
getting there. Although probably Natalie will show up with her Lumina and kind of show you can do it when they're really small. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I like that too. I look forward to having him play with some great kids. I bet they're just great kids.
It's so good.
I have so many questions for you, but I'm not going to lay them all out. Hopefully we'll get a chance to chat sometime. Oh, by the way, before I forget, Ian, was it? Ian, I got an Emergent Ventures grant. I sent you my email via chat, so feel free to run it past me too. No promises, but I might see something I can help you with. Okay, so lots of questions. Back to you, Janine. I think, all right, I'm going to tell you what I'd love to hear, and then I'll ask the question because I don't want to eat up all the time. I'm really curious about historical analogs that you've seen. I got my own kind of theories about what I see happening here. It's quite unique what you're doing, but of course, people have done some things like this before, but I bet you know more about that. And I'm also interested, you kind of touched on this and how actually Ian's question about, are you going to do this in the real world, kind of connected with what I'm interested in also is, what's your overlap with Balaji's plan, which I admire, And it seems like, I don't know, it seems like you could fit in there somewhere, or you could work with him. I don't know. I'm sure you've thought about that. Here's my real question. The only one I really ask, please, you give an answer to. I think this event was advertised as you're going to talk about problems you faced, and you did mention some of those. You mentioned getting funding was kind of hard at first, or it didn't seem like a good ask for funding because people didn't understand it. Still, I'd like to hear more. I want to learn from your mistakes, if you don't mind, or at least your challenges. What's the hardest part of your job? That's the question.
Yeah, I would love to dive in there. I thought those questions were going to be asked. Julian had told me that they were coming. So I even thought about all of them. So many challenges and so many mistakes that I would love people to avoid. And I think this is where back to KK's question around, how did we figure out funding to start? Like, we definitely took a very ambitious route to start, and I would have scaled it back if I could have. I think we burnt out a lot of folks on the original team because it was just like too big, too much risk that we took on for the first event from a cost standpoint that we had to sort of like make happen. And I think it definitely like it was a tough thing of like, okay, how do we actually fund this thing? We've committed to it. We've said that we're going to get all these people, and now getting people to show up is really hard. So I think one of the hardest things is getting people to show up. And that's just across the board. Like you can be like, well, I've got 1,000 people in my network. And then when push comes to shove, getting people to actually commit a ton of time, everyone's got stuff going on. The world is super busy all the time. So getting people to show up was by far the hardest and like judgment error that we made in the first one. It was sort of just like, oh yeah, it'll be easy to get people, and it was just a slog. The other thing that is hard is that was challenging up front was like really getting the gender dynamics right. And I still think that that's like just a constant struggle. Like anything that you're doing in frontier tech and science is hard to get sort of gender dynamics good. But then on top of it, if you're getting people to commit to sort of like a new type of social environment, people want to know what they're going to be signing up for. So a big lesson we learned was like we had to put out a lot more content than we were putting out. And that's, that's sort of separate to the gender piece, but it is women want to know a little bit more than men, and it's important to figure out how you're communicating that. So I would say like a big learning was like getting a lot of people to commit to something that has no traction to start with is hard. So start small, make it good each step of the way, and like be comfortable with that. The other side of it is that like scaling intimacy requires being intentional in some way. Like you can't just be like, okay, well, double the size of it and it's just going to work. It's like it's a totally different beast of a dynamic. And that I think is really important for people to note is like understanding the size of thing that you want to create and like working backwards to make that happen. So that's a lot on the people side, which I do think is just the hardest lesson we learned was like, you got to put in a lot of time and a lot of individual outreach and a lot of like, yeah, people don't know what this is. It's a completely new thing. Put the time aside to like have one-on-one phone calls with people to let them know what you're asking them for and figure out what a good like, I can offer you this if you join. Like what is a gift that you can give people, and what is a safety net and community that you can give people. So those are like the learnings for the mistake there, or the misjudgment that we had. Another side that has been really hard is like the events are just always more of a beast than one expects in terms of the workload. So figuring out how to empower people in the community and like very much so give people roles and recognition for what they're doing is so important. The residency model has worked really well for that because it's like people feel ownership of what they're doing. So it's like, for example, we've got people that were like, I want to run a residency. We don't, we're not paying for them to run a residency. We're not like, this is what we want to run. It's groups being like, I want to run a residency because like there's this one woman who's running the consciousness residency in Patagonia, and she's built it to a residency that's got 40 people as part of it, because her next step is she wants to build a whole like community space in the Bay that's focused on consciousness and running experiments there. So for her, she's super, super motivated to do that. Like, find people that align with the motivations of something on the ground and empower them. That was a big learning. Like, it's way better to do that than even, find someone that you just pay to run something, because they're less invested and you still end up being sort of the owner of the thing. So that's been a big, mistake or learning, and just like underestimating complexity in general. We did this year alone, we will have done 5 things by the end of the year. Like, we'll have done 5 pop-ups by the end of the year, which, at the beginning of the year, we're like, oh, that's fine. We'll totally figure that out. Figuring out funding, figuring out people, because you build it, you can't just expect everyone to come to all of them. So you got a whole new network in each one of them. Figuring out people to run tracks, running residencies, keeping things high quality. Like, it really was a beast. So do not underestimate the complexity of running things, and like really think about, if we could have done this year over, I don't think we would have done as many things as we did. I think we would have stuck to like, okay, Edge Esmeralda worked really well last year and one other pop-up worked really well. Let's do something with Edge Esmeralda again, so that we're like continuing in one place, and take on and do the second like we did. And because we felt like we had a bit of time, add like one very intentional relationship to build. So that would have been something to do. And then another mistake has been sort of like not giving enough like expectations to everyone on the ground about what they are coming to be a part of. So sort of like not really explaining the vision enough, not really spending enough time sort of like telling people about how this is, something for them to build as well, not giving people ways of like them getting rewards for giving back. That's something we've only built over time, and I would start with that from the beginning. So those would be a few of like the big learnings that we've had. And then I think the last piece would be a big learning of like, it is really like letting something that you create take on its own form and letting a culture emerge, and like embracing it versus rejecting it, I think is super important. Like, we really built Edge to be very emergent, and we're like, okay, we'll see where it goes. And that's more of like a learning that has set it up really well for success. And it's completely different from a community standpoint to the one that I expected it to be. And I love it. And I'm so excited about it. But if we hadn't been intentional about like letting it emerge versus trying to be top down about it, I think we would have seen some more issues. And I've heard a lot more challenges from different sort of network state projects and network society projects who have tried to be very top down in terms of the culture, in terms of what happens, where the workload just seems to sort of like be really challenging. So those are a few points there. And then in terms of sort of connection with the sort of network state side, we're very close with biology. And I think there's a lot of overlap and some slight differences. Like, I think we're really focused on micro exit of, take people out of their day-to-day to then implement that into their day-to-day. Whereas he's much more focused on like exit entirely and build anew, where there's like really interesting overlaps that we're learning from one another in that model. the other is sort of they're focused on sort of one place to start. And he's trying really hard to get us involved in like building that specific spot. I think for us, we're like, is Malaysia a place that we really want to be doing something, trying to understand? But I think from a governance standpoint, he's got so many interesting ideas that like we're seeing where we can like implement some of those and test a lot more with Edge. They were actually going to run a network school node at Patagonia. They were going to run a residency in Patagonia. And they just don't have enough people on the ground in Malaysia right now to make that like something they're going to do, but they're hoping to do one at Edge Esmeralda next year. So it'll be cool to see that overlap, and then we'll try and run something there. So it's like almost like an exchange program. Which would be interesting.
That's great. That is more than I could have hoped for. Thank you.
And the fun part is the network school got inspired by us having kids. So they ended up building out a kids program as well. It's quite small, but like I think that's a really cool sign of, you know, learning from all sides. Natalie, it looks like you've got a question.
Yes, it seems that every person that has a question relating to the last thing you said. So you've done an amazing job, Janine, at connecting the dots. My question was going to be, or is going to be about kids. You go there with a kid, I go with my kid to Patagonia in a couple of days. What learning opportunities or experiences do I have for her? And I really kudos to you for thinking about kids. I don't know if it was intentional or it just happened, because since I had kids, Tom, you might be on the same boat with me or kid. I realized that we all try to build startup societies. We are all in the startup societies business or space. Making startup societies is what we do, but we are usually a bunch of young, middle-aged people with no kids. And as a startup society founder, I do think that I wouldn't go to a place right now to move unless it was going to be a fruitful experience for her. And I've been taking my 1-year-old to events. She was with us in Singapore at the Network State Conference last like 2 weeks ago, and she was the only baby. There was another kid, but there were like 3,000 people and only one baby, and the gender gap so usually always there. So not only I've been thinking about the kids aspect, but also the woman aspect. Moms, breastfeeding moms, they are more tied to, they have less degrees of freedom than men. So having startup societies with spaces that give women a bit of freedom by taking a bit of the responsibility of the time of the kids, it's really important. And yeah, so I take my kid there in 2 days. How can you help me focus a bit more on my work?
Yeah, two things quick, because I know we've only got a minute left. One, it was very intentional building it with kids in mind. I have been thinking about sort of community values for kids for a very long time, and just overall how, like, when I was starting to learn about, like, you know, what makes prodigy children. It's like everyone wants a prodigy as a child. And the two big things were kids having a one-on-one tutor and kids being exposed to many different adults in sort of a very like learning environment focus. So I was like, cool, we can tackle the second pretty easily with the network that Edge has. It's like, instead of only being exposed to teachers and parents and your parents' friends, like you're being exposed to many different adults that you can learn from, and attend different classes, and then have parents sign up for, or other adults sign up for things. What we've done so far is actually partner with groups that are trying to incubate new school concepts. So there's this group called All One Thing, which is really awesome. They have been focused on incubating sort of a new school concept and building an open source AI learning platform for kids, similar to sort of 2-hour learning that Alpha School has, but more on the open source side. They're awesome. And that kind of, to me, is like where the one-on-one tutoring solve is going to be. It's kind of through sort of like AI learning for kids in the future. So our focus has been on, partnering with a group that we think is going to incubate a really cool concept, and just become an awesome school project. And over time, I would love to see a lot more invested in sort of what we're able to do for parents. And the tension there is how much parents are willing to invest themselves. So it's kind of like a parent's like, I want to be able to have full freedom on the ground. And you're like, cool, are you comfortable with like paying for a nanny while you're there? It's like, no. It's like, okay, well then what's the trade-off that we've got? And I think that's the important next piece, is like figuring out that trade-off. What is cool to see is, we're seeing a lot more people sign up to do things with kids on the ground. So every day there's sort of like a 2-hour like learning opportunity where someone can, teach kids. So we had at Edge Esmeralda, we just had kids teaching about sort of like, or someone going in and doing a talk on electromagnetism, someone doing a session on how to DJ, someone doing a session on all of these different things. So there was a lot there. That was super exciting. I realized we are 2 minutes over, so I'm going to pause at that, because I'm sure everyone here needs to hop off. I know I have to hop off, but it has been wonderful meeting you all. And yeah, I think kids are really important, and like the male to female ratio and just like gender norms generally is a very important piece for us, that I think women in these environments are just like bring a ton of vision around community, and that's an important piece for startup societies. So it's cool to see more women attending over time. It's been an area we've been growing.
Thank you, Janine. It's great to have women in thought and leadership positions do it, pushing really the bar of what pop-up cities and startup societies can do. So thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us, and all the best 2 days from now and in the
Thank you
month.
so much. All righty. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. At the end of the call, you're going to receive a survey where you're going to be able to respond to the questions. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon, and bye bye.
Thank you, Julian. Bye-bye.